Take your Bibles and go to Daniel chapter 2. Continue on our series here, and we're going to have to break this chapter up. There's a lot in chapter 2. So we're going to do half of chapter 2 this week, and we're going to half of the other half of the chapter next week. So the ultimate point of the chapter is going to be the revelation of the dream that Nebuchadnezzar has that Daniel's going to explain before the king. And we'll get to that explanation next week. So today we're going to focus on the circumstances and the situation leading up to that. So you have your handouts there. We're going to go look at Daniel chapter 2, verses 1 through 23 today. Walk through it. So have your Bibles open and follow along. Just make some commentary and some observations as we walk through the chapter. Verse 1 of chapter 2 kind of orients us to where we are in the story. Some time has passed since the end of chapter 1. It says, and in the second year of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherewith his spirit was troubled and his sleep brake from him. Daniel, just to kind of give you a little bit of the chronology here in where we are in the story. It says it's the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. It's actually probably closer to 3 years that have passed. If you remember, Daniel and his friends have been doing this 3-year training program that the Babylonians were running them through to prepare them for service. The way the story plays out, it feels like Daniel is kind of right at the end of that time period. We're going to see he and his friends are not part of the group that actually gets called in to talk to the king. But it's kind of like, they're about to graduate from their grad school there. But they're upperclassmen because they're going to have some credibility whenever Daniel says, yeah, we can answer these prayers. So they're probably right at the end of that. It says the second year of Nebuchadnezzar. That's probably also accounting for the fact that they wouldn't have counted Nebuchadnezzar's first year because that was the year that he takes over. They don't normally count those as a year of reign. Kind of credits to the previous king. So he's been king for close to 3 years. Daniel and his friends have been in Babylon for close to 3 years. But it's the second full year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And so Daniel now and his friends, probably about 18 years old or so, and we're going to see how the Lord uses this situation, this circumstance, specifically to place Daniel into a position of great influence. That from here on out, Daniel is going to be very well regarded, obviously, by the king because of the circumstances of this, even as a relatively young man. I look at the verse again, verse 1. It says, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed dreams wherein his spirit was troubled and his sleep brake from him. I don't know if you've ever woken up from a bad dream and it's just kind of you wake up in that cold sweat and your heart's pounding. That's kind of the idea here. It says that his spirit was troubled. That word troubled literally means like a hammer striking an anvil. You just picture his heart just boom, 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 boom. Whatever this dream was, it has him spooked. And so he is desperate to understand what's going on here. It's pretty common for Babylonians especially to assume that dreams come from the gods, that the gods reveal things through dreams. So he kind of has this disposition that, the gods are speaking to him, but his dream is very, very confusing, and we'll see in just a moment. I don't think he quite understands it or even remembers all of what happened. He just knows there was something that happened in that dream. He is going to be very desperate to figure out what's going on here. So he does what he expects is going to work. He's going to call in people that are supposed to be able to interpret dreams. Look at verse 2. It says, and the king commanded to call the magicians, astrologers, and sorcerers, and Chaldeans, for to show the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. Let's talk about this group of people that he's going to call in, because they're going to play heavily not only in this story, but some other stories that come up a little bit later. In a general sense, these guys would be referred to as kind of the wise men of Babylon. They were supposed to be advisors to the king. It's kind of like a select group that when the king needs special information, he's going to go to them. Probably not quite to the level of what we might think of like a presidential cabinet. When the president he has all these administrators working for him and he might bring them in to consult with them on topics. Probably not quite to that level, but these are people that when you have questions, these are the ones that the king would want to talk to. So let me just introduce you to these groups, and this is the group specifically that Daniel is in training to become a part of. You got, first of all, the group that are called magicians here. Now, we have a connotation for magicians. When we think of magicians, we're pulling rabbits out of hats and pulling quarters out of your ear. That's kind of our connotation for magicians. The magicians in Babylon were probably closer to what we might think of, I call them here religious scribes. They were scholars. These weren't people that did magic tricks, although, like I said, that connotation with magic would come up later. These guys are more, they would be students of history, students of literature. Now, when you factor that into what kind of religion Babylon had, this would be people that documented the stories of their gods and the histories of the Babylonian deities. These guys also, part of their scholarship, part of their histories was they maintained these ledgers of dream journals, dream symbols, and they could use this. So you tell me what was in your dream, we look it up in our books, we tell you what that symbol means or what that dream means, and so this is a group of guys that you want to call in. These are religious scholars. These are individuals, religious scribes. He also calls in the astrologers. Astrologers. It is, again, probably not correct to use the term astronomer. When we think of an astronomer, we think in terms of a scientist, person who studies the stars. Well, these guys did that, so there's a sense in which that's correct, but they're doing it for religious purposes more than scientific purposes. But they studied, where the constellations were and knew all the stars and the major systems in the sky. And so they would use those to kind of like we would think in terms, if you've ever heard of people that follow horoscopes, and how the stars control our destiny. So they're going to look up in a horoscope and tell you what your future holds. Always, when I was a little kid, you read those in the newspaper, and it was always like, you're going to meet someone today. Thank you, that's very helpful. They're just specific enough and just general enough to make it to where you can fit in just about anything. So people think these are really worth something. Well, these guys in Babylon, they were scientists in the sense that they knew everything about the stars. They studied religious texts, they knew about the histories, they knew where the stars were, and they would use those to then kind of interpret what was going on around them. Incidentally, when you think about these two groups, religious scholars, people who studied religious literature, people who were very familiar with religious texts, and people who studied the stars, remember this later. Daniel is eventually, we'll see through the course of the book, is going to be in charge of these guys for a long time. He's going to be the chief of the wise men. The text doesn't specifically say it, but do you suppose that Daniel at any point introduced these guys to some other religious text that they might want to consider? The Jews brought the scriptures with them when they came from Israel into captivity. I'm kind of suspicious that over time Daniel taught these guys not just the Babylonian religion, but taught them Jewish religion. It's kind of interesting, about 600 years or so later, when a mysterious star appears in the sky, there's wise men, magi from the east, who feel like this new sign in the sky and the stars signifies the birth of a Jewish king, and they head off to Jerusalem to go find the king of the Jews. You remember that when you get to the Christmas story and the wise men show up. This is that group, and they did what they knew to do. They had studied religious literature. They knew that this new king was coming. They saw maybe even a prophecy in the book of Numbers that talked about a star rising out of Judah. And so they went to go see the new king. That connection is going to be here with these wise men of the East. There were other groups that he calls in too. He calls in the magicians, he calls in the astrologers. He does call in the sorcerers, and this is pretty much exactly what you would expect a sorcerer to be. These are the people that are going to be claiming to have supernatural power. We call them necromancers here, the people that claim to communicate with the dead. Those kind of people are still around, and you drive down the street every once in a while, and you'll see a sign for Adam Sally or whatever, and you can go talk to your dead relatives. And I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock in that, but that's what these guys claim to do too. They claim to be able to do those sorts of things. So Nebuchadnezzar's pulling them in. And the last group he calls in, simply referred to in this passage as the Chaldeans. Remember, Chaldea was the area specifically around Babylon. Babylon had conquered a lot of people, brought a lot of slaves in, but you kind of suspect that Nebuchadnezzar's closest allies are going to be, kind of his own people, right? His own tribe, his own group. And so these would be his closest advisors. These are the people that he trusts the most to give him good instruction. So he pulls out everybody. He says, look, give me the magicians, give me the astrologers, give me the sorcerers, bring in my advisors. Somebody is going to interpret this dream for me. So the end of verse 2 says they came and they stood before the king. Verse 3, the king said unto them, I have dreamed a dream, and my spirit was troubled to know the dream. Then spake the Chaldeans to the king of Syria, O king, live forever. Tell thy servants the dream, and we will show thee the interpretation. So he calls them in, and he begins to speak to them. Just a kind of a side note there. It says they spoke to the king in Syriac. It's another word for the language we would call it Aramaic. Everything in the book from here all the way up till we get to about Daniel chapter 7. If you look at it in the original languages, is no longer in Hebrew. From here on out, it's all in Aramaic, the local languages of the Babylon. So the text kind of gives you a clue with that. If you're going to learn Aramaic, I suppose you can go do it. Have you done any Aramaic? Have you played with it much? Just a little bit. It's got a lot of common with Hebrew, from what I understand. They share a lot of common things. But this is the native language of the Babylonians, and so the rest of the book for the next several chapters is going to be in this. So that's why it's saying that. They say, "Oh, king, live forever." That's a pretty normal way to greet a king, and they are quite confident that they'll be able to interpret this. Because remember, the magicians specifically had all these code books. You can give us tell us what the dream was. We'll look it up and we'll tell you the interpretation. And if that doesn't work, we got the astrologers who can get information from the stars. We may be able to communicate with the spirit world. We'll figure this out, king. Just tell us. They're very confident. We will show you the interpretation. There's a little complication that's entered into, though, in verse 5. King answered and said to the Chaldeans, This thing is gone from me. If you will not make known to me the dream with the interpretation thereof, you shall be cut into pieces, and your houses shall be made a dunghill. He says, this thing is gone from me. Now, the question is, okay, you could go one of two directions with this. He could be testing them, which is a possibility. These guys are supposed to be pretty smart. They're supposed to be figuring all this out. So he's like, no, you tell me the dream and the interpretation. We'll see how good you are. And it may be that, he's just honestly doesn't remember it. Pretty close to, reality for many of us. You wake up from a dream and you know it was something. But you try to remember, what was it? What was so scary in that dream? Or what was I dreaming? And it's gone as soon as you wake up. So he knows it was something. Maybe he remembers enough of it to know if they're right or not, if they tell him a dream, but he doesn't remember everything about it. But either way, the statement he makes to them is, no, you got to give me both. You got to tell me what the dream was and what it means. So if you don't do it, you're toast. Verse 6, but if you show the dream and the interpretation thereof, you shall receive with me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore show me the dream and the interpretation thereof. So he promises a punishment if they can't, promises reward if they can. They answered, you kind of sense with a little bit of nervousness in their voice here. They answered again and said, let the king tell the servants the dream, and we will show thee the interpretation. Like, maybe you didn't understand me. You have to tell us the dream first. They're trying to reason with them. They can't apply their dream formulas to a dream they don't know about. Now at this point, the king starts getting, I think, a little suspicious. Verse 8. The king answered and said, I know of a certainty that you would gain the time, because you see the thing is gone from you. But if you will not make known unto me the dream, there is but one decree for you. Ye have prepared lying and corrupt words to speak before me until the time be changed. Therefore tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can show me the interpretation thereof. Basically, the king says, you're just stalling for time. You're hoping I'll forget all about the dream. And then either you won't have to interpret it, or you can tell me just about anything, and I would have to agree with you because I can't remember any of it. He says, so quit stalling. You need to just tell me what's going on here. Tell me what's taking place. So if he wasn't suspicious before of these guys, he may be a little suspicious of them now. It's possible also that he does remember enough of the dream to know, because it did unsettle him. We're going to see when we see the dream in just a moment. What his dream was about a giant statue that gets destroyed. And it probably wouldn't be unreasonable for him to assume at least that statue was him. And if the statue gets destroyed, he's a little nervous, like, there's a plot against me. I mean, he's only been king now for a couple of years. Maybe somebody else is trying to do something. Maybe the gods are revealing, some sinister conspiracy. So it kind of makes you paranoid, right? Yeah, he's suspicious of everyone. Like, are you guys in on this? Are you guys trying to cover this up? And he's just panicked, in a sense, wanting desperately to understand what this dream means. He says, you're just trying to gain the times until the time be changed. You're just trying to delay this judgment and put off what's about to happen. At this point, you look at verse 10, and this group of wise men here with the Chaldeans still as their spokesman. So they answered before the king and said, there is not a man upon earth that can show the king's matter. Therefore there is no king, no lord, no ruler that asks such things of any magician or astrologer or Chaldean. It's a rare thing that the king required. There is none other that can show it before the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh. I think when you come to this, you really start to get a sense of really kind of the point of this passage. This passage is really setting up this kind of contest, if you will. This showdown between the gods of Babylon and what they can do, and the God of Israel and what he's going to be able to do. And even the Babylonians right now are admitting, look, we can't do this. It's only the gods have access to this information. Let's say it this way, only a real God could be able to explain this, could give you both the dream and the interpretation. That's not us. And so remember that when Daniel is able to do this, this is gonna affect Nebuchadnezzar's thinking as we go forward throughout the book. That he recognizes, these Babylonian gods that we've been serving, they couldn't do this. Sure seems like there's a God in Israel who knows what's what. And so this passage is really kind of introducing us to kind of this ongoing contest. Who is really God? Who truly is God? And what should we as people do about it? Verse 12, for this cause the king was angry, very furious, commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon, and the decree went forth that the wise men should be slain. They sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. The king issues his decree. He's like, all right, fine, I'll just kill all of you. Kind of picture him looking at the soldiers going, we'll round them all up. We'll bring them all in, and we're just gonna take care of these guys who are just frauds, who are trying to stall and trying to manipulate, and maybe even scheming against me. We're just gonna kill them all. And at this point, even get the guys in grad school, even get the ones in training, get them too, because these guys have been training those guys. So Daniel and his friends are going to be included in this group that's about to be rounded up. Well, obviously, word is going to get out pretty quickly. Verse 14. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is the decree so hasty from the king? And Arioch made the thing known unto Daniel. He kind of fills Daniel in on all the details. Daniel's like, why is he suddenly just announcing to kill all the wise men? And Arioch's going to explain to him because they could not explain the king's dream. Then verse 16, Daniel went and desired of the king that he would give him time and he would show the king the interpretation. I find this interesting that Daniel immediately apparently has his request granted. Daniel says, hey, can I have a shot at this? Can I answer this? And while the text doesn't go into a lot of detail, Daniel has some credibility here. I kind of suspicion that we're supposed to remember what happened in chapter 1 when we come to this chapter. That Daniel has demonstrated himself to be a person of integrity, a person who's not against the king. He's supporting in that sense the king's agenda. Remember, he had not been trying to be rebellious. He tried to do what he could without compromise. Certainly, he wants to maintain his loyalty to his God. But he's done so not in a way that's destroyed or ruined his testimony. I just want you to catch that this tricky situation, this almost kind of dangerous scenario that Daniel finds himself in, his previous testimony equips him to be able to address this as well. And just as a side reminder there, it's important. Our testimony matters. The kind of reputation that you have. Are you known as a person who keeps your word? If you're known as a person who does their job, who fulfills their responsibilities, when that kind of person then makes a request, let's give it some credibility. Daniel here has earned, in a sense, a hearing by the way he's established himself, not just at the beginning of those 3 years, but all the way through his training. His testimony made this request possible. Daniel also might get a little bit of benefit here because his testimony is that he represents a different God. Remember, all these other Babylonians, part of what the Babylonians were trying to do was to assimilate everyone to the Babylonian gods. They were trying to enculturate them, change their names and change their culture and change their religion. And apparently that training program had been really successful, but Daniel, because he purposed in his heart, has maintained his integrity with his God. And apparently everybody knows that too. So you can imagine when the Babylonians say, well, our gods can't do this. And Daniel says, could I have a crack at this? Because I've got a different God. It's almost like the king kind of says, well, okay, my God's doing it, let's try yours. He's probably at least got some familiarity with the Israeli God. Remember, he had sacked their temple before, he had taken people captive. He was probably familiar at least that there is a different God in Israel that the other nations don't serve. And he's desperate. None of these other gods can do it. All right, Daniel, what's your God got? I don't know much about him, but give it a shot. And so Daniel is going to have the opportunity now to try to explain or to understand and get from God the king's dream. That's what brings us to starting in chapter 2, verse 17. We're going to look at how Daniel approaches this problem, and specifically we're going to pay some extra attention to the prayer that he prays. So next week we'll get into what the dream actually was and what the dream means. But I want you to see how God, the circumstances through which God gives Daniel the answer to this problem. In chapter 2, verse 17, it says, and Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire mercies of the God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. One of the common themes we'll see throughout this book with Daniel and his friends is that they frequently see their lives threatened. Daniel is kind of in some hot water if this didn't work out with his dietary restrictions, chapter 1. Here, the wise men are about to be threatened. And we'll see in chapter 3 the story of the fiery furnace. We'll see it again in chapter 6 with Daniel and the lion's den. Pretty common that these guys find themselves in hard, desperate situations. It's interesting that when you look at these, it's their commitment to God and their prayer to God that sees them through in all of these cases. That they've made some decisions about what they will and will not compromise on. And they're always willing to take their request to God. It's going to be Daniel's prayer that gets him in trouble in chapter 6. It's going to be Daniel's prayer here that delivers him from trouble in chapter 2. It's going to be his commitment in chapter 1 and the three friends' commitment in chapter 3. All of these things are going to come together when they find themselves in desperate circumstances. My guess is most of us don't find ourselves very often in life or death situations. But just remember this, if God can handle the worst, probably handle whatever it is that you will face this week. Whatever you are going through. And maybe they're not life and death, but sometimes they feel that way to us. Big deals, big problems, heavy circumstances, maybe even things that nobody else knows about, but for you it's a big deal. I asked you at the beginning, what are you committed to? And who are you talking to about? Be committed to God and taking requests to God. That's the two answers to those challenges of life. Let's make some observations about the kind of things Daniel prays in this passage, the way he prays, and see if we can't learn some lessons from it. One of the things I noticed about Daniel here in verse 17 is that he understood the benefits of having support in prayer, having others pray with him. I don't deny or reject, and certainly there's value in what Jesus would talk about in the Sermon on the Mount of private prayer. But there are times and there are situations that we just need to go to the Lord ourselves. Those internal struggles and those private things that are not necessary or sometimes even appropriate to share with others. There's a place for private prayer. But don't turn that into that you have to face the challenges and the struggles of life alone. There's also benefit to having others pray with you, and to pray for you, and to support you in those trials and those tribulations that we have. One of the benefits of coming together as a class is that we pray for each other and with each other. I encourage each week to send me prayer requests or put them on Facebook so that we can share that burden with each other. And I encourage you to keep doing that because Daniel and his friends recognize the value of what Jesus would say in the Gospels, 2 or 3 coming together. That when we come together and we support each other and we encourage each other in prayer, sometimes just hearing somebody else pray for you, it calms your soul. It reminds you that we have support and that it's not just you and it's not just, your personal issue, that others are willing to come alongside and help. And Daniel and his friends, he's going to get together with them. There's value in praying together, praying with others. Notice also, according to verse 18, he's praying very specifically. There is a specific need, and that's what he's asking God about. That they would desire the mercies of God of heaven concerning this secret, that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. I have a feeling there was a little bit of urgency to that prayer. The guard is standing outside the door with a sword, and if you can't come up with an answer here, then you're done. And so he's praying very specifically where this is what we need. Again, there are times and places for general prayers and well, I will tell you this, I'm not a big fan of prayers like this. God, be with the missionaries. What does that mean? Sometimes we pray very generically. But there's value in praying specifically. We put up on the list up here on the board every week what the missionaries say, this is what we need, this is what we're praying for. So I remind you again, are we checking this? Are we looking at this? Are we asking the Lord, will you take care of this need for this missionary? He's facing this challenge or this struggle or this issue. And I'm not trying to be critical of a heart that says, God, be with the missionaries, but I just want you to understand that there's value in praying specifically. Don't feel guilty about asking God to do particular specific things that are needs in your life. And again, sometimes I feel guilty sometimes, like, Lord, I need this, and I need this. And you kind of feel like, should I be doing that? I mean, shouldn't I just say, Lord, whatever you want to do? Well, yeah, that's my attitude of Lord, whatever, but he says, let your requests be made known unto God. It's okay to pray specifically. If there's a real need, ask God to meet that need. This is very real to them right now. But they need to know the dream, and they need to do this quick, because this is not going to end well. They prayed with others. They prayed very specifically. Look at the next few verses. You'll see some more statements about their prayer. Verse 19 says, then was the secret revealed to Daniel in a night vision. That kind of tells me, I didn't put it on the list, but they prayed pretty persistently. They're praying through the night for this, and God finally gives them the answer in the night. Then Daniel, now notice this prayer, blessed the God of heaven. Daniel answered and said, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and might are his. He changeth the times and the seasons. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. He giveth wisdom unto the wise and knowledge to them that know understanding. We'll see this, and we'll see it again coming up in verse 22, that one of the characteristics of Daniel's prayer was he understood where the information he needed would come from, that God was the source of wisdom. And he also understood that God was powerful, that God was the source of all power. We'll see the specifics of what he means by this in the rest of the chapter when he says in verse 21 that God removeth kings and setteth up kings. Specifically, the vision that Nebuchadnezzar had was about a series of empires that were going to come upon the world, where this empire would finally end and be replaced by another empire, which would finally end and be replaced. And ultimately, it would be God's kingdom that would be established in the earth, and it would never end. And so Daniel's seeing, he's understood now this vision represents a series of God bringing down kings and bringing up kings and bringing down kings. He understood from that, God, you're in charge. You're the one in control of the world. You have the power to do anything. I think that definitely affects Daniel's prayer life. He's not praying, God, if you can, could you do this? And his prayer is going to be, God, if you will you do this? There's never a question of God's ability. There's nothing too big to ask God to do. God can do anything. He's got all power. He can raise up and bring down nations. He can probably address the situations and the circumstances that we face in life, the challenges that we feel like are too big and too insurmountable. Daniel, as he prays, does so with an attitude of understanding God's power. There's something else I want you to notice in this, just kind of a side lesson, if you will, on this. Look at his statement again at the end of verse 21. He giveth wisdom unto the wise, and knowledge to them that know understanding. Maybe that sounds a little strange to us. He gives wisdom to the wise. Well, wise really need more wisdom? I mean, if they're wise, they already have it, right? He gives knowledge to them that know understanding. Well, isn't that the point? They already know things. Understand what he's describing here. What he's just done in acknowledging God's power and putting himself in a sense in a proper position. God, you are all powerful. Think about another passage of scripture that Daniel may have been familiar with because it was written by Solomon long before Daniel comes on the scene. The fear of the Lord is what? The beginning of wisdom. So Daniel understood that understanding who God is where wisdom begins. And then once you have that, once you fear the Lord, then there's more wisdom to come. It's wise to fear the Lord, and to live in that fear continues to bring more wisdom. In a sense, God gives more wisdom as they continue to obey. Let's say it this way. When you obey what you know to do, God reveals more of what you need to do. When you are doing what God wants you to do now, then you can trust that God will reveal to you what he wants you to do next. He will give, if you're already wise in submitting yourself to God and fearing the Lord, then he gives you wisdom that you still need in the future. Think about verses like Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will do what? He will direct your paths. If you're wise to submit yourself to God and to obey God already, then God will give more wisdom when you need it. And what that also means is, don't expect God to give more wisdom if you're not obeying what you already know to do. Does that make sense? If you're already saying, God, I don't want to obey you in this area, then why would we expect God to give us something else that he wants us to do? You see how that works? How many times is it that we'll do things like, Lord, I need your will in this area. God, show me this. God, direct my paths. And what God may be doing is saying, well, let's take care of this first. There's this area that I've been working on and you haven't wanted to do anything about it. You've kind of been overlooking it, you've kind of been defending it, and you've kind of been justifying it and saying it's okay. And God says, I really can't take you over there until you were ready here. Show yourself wise, obey what you know to do, and then God will give wisdom to the wise. I had a seminary teacher who had a sign on his door, and it said, I am educated far beyond my level of obedience. And that was a very convicting statement for me, because my guess is all of us know more to do than we currently are. And our responsibility is, before we start asking what to do next, let's ask the Lord, are we doing what we're supposed to be doing now? Search me, O Lord, try me, see if there be any wicked way in me. It's a scary prayer, but it's necessary if you want wisdom for the future. Get right with God and make sure you're obeying in every area that you know now. You can stand before the Lord and say, Lord, as far as I know, I'm in a right relationship with you right now. Then you can say, Lord, show me more, and he says he will give wisdom to the wise. So that works. God gives more wisdom as we continue to obey. Verse 22 again is more acknowledgement of that wisdom and power. He says, he revealeth deep and secret things. He knoweth what is in darkness, and the light dwelleth in him. So verse 20 is ultimately calling our attention to the fact that Daniel was submitted to God's authority. It says, wisdom and power come from you. God, I want to be right with you. I want to serve you. We're doing all this because of you, and because of that, then, Lord, I can trust you to reveal to me what I need to know. Verse 23 shows us another element of his prayer life. He closes his prayer with this. He says, I thank thee and praise thee, O thou God of my fathers, who hath given me wisdom, and hath made known unto me now what we desired of thee. For thou hast now made known unto us the king's matter. One of the things Daniel does is in his prayer, he remembers to be thankful. One of the benefits of doing things like we did earlier this morning, where we call attention to answered prayers to remind us, do we go back to the Lord and say, thank you for answering those prayers? Think about the story in the Gospels of the people that the lepers that Jesus healed. Go and show yourself to the priest, and these 10 guys all take off. And as they go, they're healed. It's kind of sad, though, that only one of them goes back and says, thank you. You answered our request. You gave us what we needed. And he remembered to be thankful. Daniel here, when he realizes that God has revealed the king's dream to him, says, and so don't neglect that aspect of prayer. Be thankful for the prayers that God has answered. And then notice also something else I noticed from verse 23. Do you understand Daniel has not yet verified this answer with the king? I mean, he hasn't gone to see the king yet to make sure that they got this right. This really was the dream, and this really was what's going on. Daniel was praying in faith. The Lord has told him something, and Daniel is going to operate now under the assumption that that's the truth. And I'm going to go tell the king, this was your dream. There's a confidence in what God had revealed. And we don't often get new information from God. Not expecting that God's revealing stuff to us new in dreams and things like that. But remember, we have a book full of revelation that God has given to us. He's given us answers to a lot of our questions. And there are times where we'll look at those answers and we're like, does that really work? I mean, I don't see how that's going to help. I mean, I got this problem, and you say I'm supposed to do this, but I don't see. And sometimes instead of taking God's answers in faith, we kind of question it, we're hesitant, we're reluctant. Well, listen, if God gave the answer in his word to your problem, he told you what to do, he told you how to respond, how to react, how to behave, how to whatever. You get an answer from his word as to how to address your situation. Take it in faith. Say, Lord, I don't have to understand how this is going to work. I just know this is what you said I'm supposed to do. So in faith, I'm going to go forward. I think when you look at this list, there's a lot of lesson about our prayers to take a look at. Pray with other people, share your burdens, share your prayer requests with others. Pray specifically. Always do so acknowledging God's wisdom and God's power. Submit ourselves to God's authority. I will do whatever you ask. Make sure we're thankful for answered prayers and obey in faith. I think we have confidence that we can pray like Daniel because we see evidence here, and I think we've probably all seen evidence in our lives. Right, next week we'll look at specifically what that answer to the prayer was, what was the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and what does that tell us about not only the future of Babylon here, but even some things about the future for us. So we'll look at that next week. We give you a couple of church announcements, and then we have some specific class things to bring to your attention. First of all, Senior Saints First Tuesday Brunch. Some of us qualify for this. I won't look around and tell you who. First Senior Saint Lunch Tuesday Brunch will be this Tuesday, April 2nd, 9:30 at the Gathering Place. This month, you're doing a potluck brunch. So if you plan to come, bring a breakfast dish or a side to share. No need to sign up for that. Just show up, but that's at the Gathering Place on Tuesday. Then also for some of you, be eligible for this, there's a mother and daughter tea coming up. 1st to 6th grade girls and their moms invited to join for a mom and daughter tea from 3 to 5 on Saturday, April 6th. That is $7 per person, and the deadline to register for that is today. One more church announcement, just a reminder, because of Easter Sunday, we will have services obviously this morning, but no services this evening. So take that extra time to enjoy some rest or some time with family and friends. And then one I want to make you just quick aware of, and look around and see people that you know that are not here this week and get the word out to them, because this is kind of a short notice one, but we wanted to jump on this quick. We've been talking about finishing up getting the next 200 giggle bags ready for Michael's Pantry. And everything is just about in. There's still a few items left on the Amazon shopping list if you haven't been able to get those yet. So you can still get those ordered and sent out this week. You can either have them delivered directly to Megan, or if you want to have them delivered to you and just bring them with you on Sunday. But we want to go ahead and get these put together. So this next Sunday, next week, April 7th, we're going to, right after church on Sunday morning, just head over to the gathering place. And it's going to be a simple fellowship. There's a sign-up sheet out there. We're just going to do sandwiches, so you can sign up for meats or breads or maybe some chips or drinks or whatever. So super simple, not going to be real complicated. You can just basically just bring everything with you when you come over at 11:30. We'll set out whatever we have and just run through the line. Everybody can make them a quick sandwich. The main thing we'll do that day is set up an assembly area. Twice as many as last time. We did 100 of these last time. We're going to try to do 200 of them this time. And just knock these things out and take care of it. The needlers will be there, and she's planning to come as well to kind of oversee and to help us out with that. But make your plans to be there, and like I said, look around. If you see people that are not here this week that you know are part of the class that you'll see throughout the week, just let them know, hey, are you coming? They can either just text me if they want to bring something, and I can get them signed up. I will put the sign-up list after today on Facebook as well, so you can see who signed up for what, and people can reach out to me that way. But I hope you're going to be able to make it, and obviously the more people who come, the better that's going to be, the quicker that's going to go, and it will be a good time for us to see each other outside of class and have a fellowship together. One last thing that I'll mention to you, just a prayer request that I just became aware of. Just if you know Tina, she's been very sick lately, so she's been out for a couple of weeks, but Mrs. Stewart texted this morning and just said, please pray for Mom, that she's not feeling very well. So if you pray for Tina throughout this week, I'm sure she would appreciate that as well. And any other prayer requests that you come across throughout the week, send them to me, let me know, and I'm happy to either pass those on or pray with you specifically just when you want that too. Right. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you back here next Sunday for the second half of Daniel chapter 2. Have a good week.